to Soul Naked, your podcast all about embodied healing and sacred sensuality. I am Tanya Hirsch, and this podcast is intended to guide you home to your truth and feminine power. Each episode is designed to inspire you to create a pleasure-filled life that is in alignment with your soul. Let's drop the mask and dive right in.
Our infinity, our divinity.
Welcome back to the Soul Naked podcast. Today I have an incredible conversation with Allan McGrath, I think. I hope I pronounced that right. He is an embodied intimacy mentor who works with men and women to truly live the teachings of sacred intimacy. He teaches a lot of polarity work, feminine, masculine energetics from an authentic, grounded space. You can feel his embodiment is really true and aligned. And he teaches men to lead themselves as they evolve in the practice of embodied masculinity, living with purpose and unlocking their true sexual power, as well as women in their journey of fearless feminine embodiment, sexual yoga, and the arts of intimacy. So I'm reading his bio right now because I couldn't put it into better words. He also guides couples to deepen their connection through polarity and relational intimacy practices with his workshops, trainings, and one-on-one coachings. And it's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with him where we dive into the work he's sharing, into his personal story, into real man's work and how it looks like in real life, real personal growth. So we're talking about tiptoeing around the deep inner work and why we should avoid it, all of us, and the pitfalls of polarity. So it's an amazing conversation with a lot of wisdom that he shared with us, and I can't wait for you to listen to it. And before we dive in, I am announcing my upcoming Embodied Womb Wisdom retreat in Tulum, close to Tulum, in an amazing retreat center that I'm guiding with Shani, the woman that I joined my ayahuasca retreat. She's an amazing medicine woman, and together we will create maybe the last magic for a while, because she's going to be a mommy. And it's just before she's giving birth. So it's a magical portal for you to connect to your body's wisdom, to open your heart, to connect to your womb, to create, I see it as creating a golden, soft, warm, embracing cave for whatever wants to be birthed through you. Either it's a project that's coming through or a baby that you want to call into your life, that we will create a warm, nurturing, loving space so it can feel welcomed and it comes from a place of purity. And we will do all the beautiful feminine embodiment practices like womb and breast massage. We will do a plant medicine journey. So if you want to receive more information, send me a private message. We only accept women that we have a call personally so the group can be aligned. We will have a Temazcal, yoni steaming, a yoni egg initiation that can be really healing and life-changing when we do this in person, to experience the sacredness of the space and our own sensuality. We will have a naked yoga shooting, a photo shooting. We will go to a cenote in Mexico and have a flower ceremony. We will have cacao. We will, just being in this space of women is very empowering and remembering and healing, and I can't wait for this dream being birthed into reality. So if you feel like joining, send me a message or Shani, and we would love to have you if this is aligned from both sides. And now, without further ado, let's welcome Allan to the podcast. Welcome to the Soul Naked podcast, Allan. I'm so excited to dive Soul Naked with you today.
Beautiful. Likewise.
The first question I ask all of my guests is, what does Soul Naked mean to you right now? Whatever comes up intuitively.
What it feels like for me is having a really soft front of my body, like relaxing past any closure or constriction and opening to what wants to come through us today.
I love that. So for everyone who's listening and they don't know you, can you share a little bit about who you are, what your magic is, what you're sharing with this world at the moment?
Yeah, so My name's Allan McGrath Isbell, and I'm a men's work and relationship coach. And I've dedicated my last 8 years, going on 9 years, to men's work in particular. And a lot of that was inspired by my own journey, my own search for growth and inadequacy. In fact, I felt early on in my life that like I didn't receive those initiations that I felt like I should have as a young man. So I sought them out, and that led me to men's work. And in men's work, myself included, I wanted to apply that stuff to relationship. And as I grew in my own leadership, I started to find that became the place, that became the kind of dojo to really apply those things that we were learning and practicing and growing in the work that I was doing with men and I was doing myself. And so I kind of began to include that in both my own studies and trainings, but also what I was sharing with people. And so I work with men and women one-on-one, and I work with couples, and I do group programs and trainings, and that leads me here talking with you today.
Amazing. And it's so important, the work that you're sharing. And I saw you grew a lot in these last few months and years because it is so magnetizing and so essential in the world right now that men come back into their true power and leadership, that we look at the layers we've built around what's not true. And right. I'm curious, in your path, you talked a little bit about your journey, like before you started this path, the initiations you haven't received. How was your way of growing up as a man in this world? And that lead you to this path right now of sharing it, because I feel the best coaches are the ones that have experienced the opposite, because they know exactly how it feels.
Right.
So how was your path in becoming the man that you're embodying today? Yeah,
that's a great question. Well, let's see. It's a great question and a big question. So we'll see how it goes. Well, I would say probably like a lot of men, I was let's see, a couple of big things. One is I hid my emotions. I learned that my emotions were essentially not okay. And along with that were my needs and my desires. I learned at some point in time to not trust those things. And like many things, we can trace pretty much all of our conditioning back to childhood at some point. And that's definitely where I got mine. But I think that is a common theme for a lot of men, is those two core things. Like we learned that our emotions weren't okay, and we learned that our needs were not okay. And our needs are, it's bigger than just like I need food and water. It's like our sexual needs, our desires for, what we want for ourselves, for our life. And so it created a kind of hiding. I hid, I kept to myself, I closed off instead of opening. And it created a lot of confusion in how I related, particularly to women. It created a lot of walls in me between my intimate partner and my family. And it also, I think a big part of it was it kept me from having really close relationships in general, but particularly to men that I would consider brothers and to intimate partners. And so I struggled in that department. Like I said, I felt something was missing. And I just had this intuition that it had to do with it had to do with masculinity. It had to do with other men. And I remember my first experience in a kind of men's group setting was a workshop. They had us do a process of feeling a feeling that we had never fully felt. And that was a very transformative moment for me, because it showed me that not only were my feelings really fucking powerful. Like, I remember feeling this feeling and kind of like being held back by these other men who were, bigger than me. And I was, making them struggle to hold me back from the force of my emotion. But also that as I expressed what was most true for me, people could love me better. It's a simple way to put it. People could more adequately know who I was, and therefore love me even more. And that was a revelation. It sounds silly, but it's something that I've seen a lot in the men's groups that I've run on my own, and in the work that I've done since then, that a lot of men will hold back what's true for them, women as well, but men will hold back what's true for them because they've learned somewhere along the line that what is in them is not okay. So it's better to hide. So to have those experiences of revealing themselves in a safe way, and then being loved from it, that's where a lot of the work that I do, that's kind of where it goes, is giving men and women the experience of revealing themselves soul naked, if you will, and trusting the goodness of that, trusting that revealing of who they really are is the best thing they could possibly do, and is actually the thing that they're searching for. It's actually the thing that they want in their life, is like a more full experience of who they are. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I feel every single person who's listening has either been there or is still in the state where we feel kind of safe in our protection layers, but we also don't experience the full spectrum of life. It's like we're all walking around with these cages around our hearts, so we don't get hurt again because the pain was too much. Some of it hasn't even been felt. That's why it's so scary to go there, and we find all the distractions and protections. So I'm curious, because it's also a huge part of my work, and also what some of it you shared already, what breaks down these walls the most is coming into safe spaces where your whole reality and what you thought was true is being smashed. Like I had so many sisterhood and mother wounds, and it didn't feel safe to share my heart, my emotions, my needs. Like you, similar story, weren't seen, didn't matter. I always adapted. I was like a chameleon that adapted everywhere they went. And then I came in my first women's circle, and I just being in this energy of safety to be seen, I was crying the whole time. Like my wall didn't have a chance to stay anymore, because when someone shares from the heart, and that's the magic of authenticity, if someone is brave enough to actually show their raw expression and their raw emotions, something inside of you remembers that that's also inside of you. And for me, that was also the start of where I saw, wow, actually the word that I thought was true is not the truth. Like there's so much more. And of course, if we break down these walls, it's scary, because it means we can get hurt again. And if we release these emotions that have been stuck, it's not a nice process most of the time. But if we're being held in a safe container, this is where true healing can happen, and where when we open, we experience, of course, also a lot more pleasure and a lot more connection, and we experience ourselves. We see it's safe to be ourselves. Maybe we reflect on our lives that we've been around the wrong people our whole lives. We attracted them because we were matched to closed hearts. Closed hearts attract closed hearts, and then our life can realign to our truth. So I'm curious about your work. How do you bring this wisdom into the man's world in your offerings?
Well, I tend to, maybe it's the gift of that chameleon. I also had that for a long time. I could just adapt and shift to anything, right? And that's a part of a kind of a coping mechanism, right? Like we'll be who they need us to be, and then hopefully they'll love us in return. Just a side note for anybody listening, just check if you're doing that. But as far as how I bring men into it, well, that creating a radically, like welcoming men into a radically different space is the first way to do that, right? Like the spaces that I hold are different than the sports games that you're going to go to, or the party, or the right. Like it's a radically different space, and it's a sacred one, and it's kind of a flimsy word these days, but it's true. It's like it's a radically different space. It's a liminal space. It's a space where magic can happen, where we can like do deep. We can deeply experience the truth of who we are, and to let go of those things that are no longer serving us. And it starts with that. It starts with that permission that is actually possible. And so oftentimes, for me, change happens in the body. So I'll use lots of different tools to get guys to experience even just that slight little bit of openness of like feeling what it feels like to be seen in their body, or reflecting, or getting, we can't see ourselves accurately, but if we can feel our body, and then we can get positive reflection from those around us, that's how we can start to let go of those weird, frozen ego states that we developed as kids that are keeping us in a kind of seesaw of immaturity and avoidance, and grow. And so, I've spent 15 years of my life as a practicing meditator, and I'll use kind of any way that I can. I've been at this for a little while, so I'll use whatever tool kind of hits me in the moment to accentuate somebody's experience of openness or experience of growth in that moment. But those two pieces of trusting the body and paying more attention to it, and then in a safe and well-held space, trusting the objective experience of the group or of the people around you, those two things are good markers for growth.
And can you name a specific example that comes into your mind where you just remembered in your heart because it was so powerful? It doesn't even have to be a tool, but a moment in the retreat or a workshop you shared where a man really cracked open from the depth of his heart and soul, and where he remembered his truth.
Oh man, there's been so many, and I've been asked this question a lot of times, and I always feel bad answering it, because when I'm in those spaces, in some ways it's just a blur. Like I know guys who will like pull their phone out and like film it like selfie style as some guy's having a breakthrough, and it's just not my style. I'm just so in it that like even as it's coming up, it just kind of disappears, and I don't really hold on to it. But let me see if I can find. I mean, there's
can
been
also be a moment that you experienced where you felt like, wow, a huge wall has just been cracked open right now.
Yeah. I mean, one particular experience that I've shared about, a big part of men's work is kind of reconciling, and also let's just define men's work. Men's work is a kind of loose conglomeration of let's say like therapeutic and initiatory work. I think that is a way for the modern man to experience what he might have experienced in our past, right? In our past, men would have been initiated as boys into, as a clear marker. They'd have to face some kind of challenge or something fairly extreme that they would have to navigate through, usually with the support of older men, that on the other side of which they would be welcomed in, no longer as a boy, but as a man, into something bigger than just themselves. And they would have to have left, the warm arms of their mother and gone into this kind of cold, dark place of the masculine and come out the other side. And we just don't have that these days. Like the closest thing we have is like turning 21 and being able to drink. And it's like, okay, great. Like,
in Germany, it's 16.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. Awesome. So we don't have it. We just don't have it. And so, we see men in their 30s lost, wondering who they are, still playing out 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, because we never, women in a way have a built-in initiation into their body, and there's a real gift in that. And so for men, it kind of has to be this external experience that, like, we have to initiate ourselves these days, because no one's going to do it for us. And so that's kind of what men's work is. It's a kind of a self-initiatory experience. And a big part of that is reconciling our relationship with other men, with the masculine. And our father is our first relationship to the masculine, right? Our father is like the masculine version of God, so to speak. And so that's a tricky relationship, needless to say. And so working with our relationship to our father is an important piece, and it's often referred to as the father wound, right? It's that original wound that is related to the qualities and energetics of the masculine. And so some of the work that I'll do is around that. And one particular experience that I had, there was one man who, in his words, had been in more foster homes in his life than he was years old. And he was like maybe 30. He'd been in more foster homes than he'd been than years old he was, and never knew his father. His mother, he can remember her like giving him up as a kid, like her at the foster home being like, please take him. Like, I can't have him. So he had some really, kind of intense rejection wounds and lack of belonging. And I had these guys go through an experience of reconciling their inner, that little boy in them, which is still very much alive, even if they're in their 40s or 50s, and their father. And this experience in particular, I had them be in groups of 3. And that one man happened to be in the one group of 4. And it just so happened that he went, everybody else in the group went, and he was last. But every other group in the immersion had a group of 3. So now all of a sudden, whereas every other guy who had been doing the experience had been kind of just in his little group of 3, right? And I was kind of narrating the process for them. And now the entire group was finished except for him. And so here he was having this group of, I think it was 10 or 12 men, all putting their attention onto him. And not just in, any moment of, just like any random day. It's like this moment of him touching this thing that was so deep and so tender and so raw in him. And it was one of the only times that I almost couldn't get through the facilitation I was doing, because I was just so, like, my heart was so cracked open at this experience of him. Because in it, he's got all these men around him, and he had the opportunity to speak the words that that little boy in him could never say to his father, but always wanted to. And then he got to receive the words from his father that he never got to hear as a little boy.
Wow.
And I get chills today even talking about it, because it was just it in those spaces, because they are so different. There is such a radical sense of acceptance and trust and brotherhood. Kind of magic is infused in it that even talking about doesn't really do it justice. It's one of those things that you had to be there, but yeah, that moment always stands out, because it was so unplanned. It wasn't like I was trying to give him some special experience, but life so wanted it for him that's how it ended up. And that's one of many examples that that kind of thing has happened.
Wow, that sounds really powerful and amazing. How did his life change after this moment?
Well, he actually initiated contact with his birth father not long after that. And he hadn't seen him since I don't know how long, but it had been quite a long time. I mean, he was in his 30s at this point. And as far as I know, he reestablished a relationship with him. And that was something that I don't think he ever thought he was going to do. Yeah.
Wow. Imagine the ripples from this act.
Right.
It also gives permission to everyone who thought it's not possible in this lifetime. Like we can break down so much, even generational trauma by us choosing this path, really doing the work, not waiting for them to come to us, but to really find true forgiveness and heart opening moments.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, my question just went away out of the window. You teach a lot about feminine and masculine dynamics in your work, and there's a lot of people popping up everywhere right now teaching about polarity. So I would love to start from the basis for those who are not familiar with this work. What is feminine and masculine energy in its basic, healthy sense?
Cool. Another good big question. We'll try to answer it. Try to answer it simply, though.
I'm good into big questions.
So everybody knows the symbol of the yin and yang, right? And that is basically masculine and feminine. It is a qualification of our experience that we live in a place of dualistic realities, right? Where there's black and there's white, there's long and short, there's masculine and there's feminine. And at its most basic, masculine is associated with consciousness or space. And a beautiful metaphor to think of it is like the banks of the river. The banks of the river are sturdy, they have structure, they flow in they move in a certain direction at a certain, angle, and they provide the container for water, which would be the feminine, to move, to flow, to reach towards the ocean, right? And both are necessary. Let's say the ocean is union, right? The ocean is oneness. In order to reach the ocean, both the riverbanks and the water, they need each other. The riverbanks without the water is just dry and cracked and rigid, and it's probably not going to reach all the way to the ocean. The water without the riverbanks is just going to become mud. There's no structure, it just becomes, just stuck, right? And at its essence, we all have those qualities in us. We all have the qualities of directionality, of stability, of structure, and we all have, and that would be associated with like our consciousness, right? Like our ability to be aware, right? And then we have the thing in us that flows, the life in us that is moving through us. It is like basically anything that we can sense is the feminine. And all the space that is surrounding and within what we sense is the masculine. And there's that philosophy can be found in pretty much every single religion. Carl Jung he really was touching on something like many years ago. These days, people think it's like this novel idea, but it's really quite ancient. It's quite foundational to our experience. And it has become as you said, like a big topic that a lot of people are talking about. And the polarity is the charged experience that happens between the masculine and the feminine poles, between the pole, like the black and white of the yin and yang. It's that energy that's between them. And in a relational moment, a moment between two beings, if one being takes on the qualities of the masculine and animates them through its body, and another being takes on the qualities of the feminine and animates the feminine through its body, that when they meet, that is polarity. That's charge. That's electricity. It's magnetism. And we fucking want that. Like, that is a feeling of being alive. It's that spark that happens when you meet somebody new, just like, you're just drawn to them, or you're drawn in, like this endless source of, like infinite inspiration and beauty and love. And so the what we've seen now is, people helping other people to access that and learn about that. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But as we were talking about before the podcast, there's also a lot of holes in it and misconceptions and wounds that people have that they just kind of plug into those teachings, and then kind of makes everything suck. to put it lightly. And we can talk about what those things are. First, you probably want to identify what it is that we're talking about before we talk about the holes in it. But yeah, polarity is the exchange of energy between somebody in their masculine and somebody in their feminine. And it doesn't have to be that a man is in his masculine and the woman is in her feminine just because a man's body, usually I would say like 80% of the time, is more identified with its masculine energy than with its feminine energy, and vice versa for a woman. But that doesn't mean that the man doesn't have feminine energy. It just means that he's more like his awareness is more oriented towards awareness rather than energy. And for a woman, her awareness is more identified with energy. She's more identified with the things that flow. And you see it, like, a woman's body receives, a man's body gives, penetrates, right? So the masculine penetrates, the feminine receives. And so it's a really, I mean, it's one of the most like the deep practice of that is one of the most profound things I've come across so far in my 30 short years. But it can be misconstrued a lot, particularly with our kind of over identification with identification, to put it one way. So yeah, I'll stop there and we'll see where we want to go with it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I loved the picture. It was a very beautiful way of really seeing the essence of the masculine and the feminine. And also, I love that you said every single person on this planet loves to have a polar relationship. But I feel the problem in our society is that we have so many wounds, society reasons, and also how we grow up. There's a lot of trauma and a lot of false conditioning that doesn't allow us as women to be in our feminine. It doesn't feel safe. And also the masculine doesn't feel safe to be in his masculine. And that's why there's so many, I think that's even
Absolutely.
a reason, one of the main reasons why the divorce rates are so high, because if the sex life and the polarity goes away, it's a friendship and not a relationship. And then most of relationships fail and try to make it work. But if the polarity is not there, you can try to fix it only on an energetic level. But I feel the deep-rooted work that has to be done is the trauma work. The reason why we feel safe in the first place, to really be in our essence that we identify with. Absolutely. So I would like to know the holes that you were speaking about, because I know there's a lot of popping up right now in the scene. And if we bring those traumas, if these unhealed wounds into these teachings and apply it in areas where it's maybe not healthy, there can be leaky energy in this whole dynamic.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to share more about this.
I'll just take what you just said, and I totally agree. Like I think we shouldn't even be talking about polarity until we're in a like deeply healthy, committed, equal relationship, like a relationship that's truly healthy. Because polarity has to be built on, first of all, each being has to be sovereign. They have to be, they have to have, like, their own cup has to be full, so that then they can come to a relationship and say, okay, my cup's full, your cup's full. If we join together, wow, what else could be created, right? Now that's not easy. But that's something to work towards, right? It's a good map. So for you to have done your own inner work, and as much as you can, right? There's constantly more unconscious things in you to bring. Stops. Yeah, it never stops. But also, you're perfectly okay as you are. That's a part of it. Like, I see the polarity world can become just another way to continue our endless search for self-improvement. And I don't think that game ends well, because basically we're constantly saying to ourselves that we're not enough as we are. And if we're not enough, well, our partner is definitely not going to be enough. Right. So to me, it's like, okay, we have to get to our own place of like sovereignty and enoughness, and our partner can do the same. And then we can learn to relate to each other as beings who are enough, who also have their shortcomings, who have their shadows, who have their wounds, and relate to those wounds in ourselves and each other in a way that's healthy, in a way that is, respectful, that cultivates kindness and acceptance and compassion and like true, honest, like we have each other's best interests at heart, no matter what. And we can only really do that if we really accept each other for who we are and if we accept ourselves for who we are. Now, from there, if we go, okay, I'm enough, you're enough, nothing needs to change, we can then say, okay, in any given moment, I can kind of take a certain stance in my being that creates an equal and opposite stance in your being. So I might, for example, take a stance of, and these days, I'm never thinking, just for anybody out there who's maybe been listening to me for a while, I've never thought in my mind, like, okay, I'm gonna do something really masculine right now. I'm gonna do something really masculine so that my partner gets into her feminine. I've never thought that ever. Because you get to a certain point of practice where, like, in every moment, there's an exchange of energy happening between you and whoever you're relating with, right? And if you're subtle and sensitive enough, you can feel that. And to like truly create polarity is to allow that dance to just magnify, to allow that thing that's passing back and forth between you to magnify. And you recognize, oh, when I do this, like, for example, if I'm a man and I deepen my breath and I feel the ground beneath me and I relax the front of my body and I feel her more than I was a moment ago. Oh, her body just relaxed and her spine started to sway a little bit. That is polarity. Like, that is masculine and feminine in a dynamic in that moment. And it's not something that we do or that we use to try and change each other or fix each other or change ourselves. It's actually just an expression of what's true for us in that moment. And it could be the opposite. My partner might take a stance of stability and structure and presence, and I might go into some deep emotional expression, right? It's not like I'm the man, so I have to be masculine. She has to be feminine. But because I think, as you said before, society has not, like, we've become so disconnected from men, from their masculinity. Well, we've all been disconnected from our masculinity and our femininity, like our true essential masculinity and femininity. But for men in particular, I see, a lot of men feel inadequate about their masculinity. They feel inadequate about it. And so they come to work like this, and they basically just bring their not enoughness to masculine and feminine dynamics. And I know this because I did it. I did it for fucking years. And anytime that my partner was being masculine, I shut down because I took it as an affront to my own masculinity. Because I was identified as, because I felt like my masculine was not enough. I felt that I had to be masculine all the time. And that is the thing that I see rampant now through these kinds of teachings and people who absorb them. So much so that we say things like, I've heard people say it all the time, like, they'll say, like, as a masculine, I blah, blah, blah. Or as a feminine, I blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're not a masculine or a feminine, like, you are a human who has these qualities. And so I really, because these things are so, like, they really are so deep, they really run really deep in us, that I want to really encourage people to I don't know quite how to put it, like question, like, are you using these things to change who you are or to change your partner? Right? If you're saying things like, I'm not masculine enough, or I'm not feminine enough, or my partner's not masculine enough, or my partner's not feminine enough, stop doing masculine and feminine stuff. Like, just stop, because it's not helping you and it won't help you. Like, go back to that core stuff in your childhood around what made you feel not enough, what made you feel like who you were just as you were was not okay, and get that stuff in your awareness.
Amen. Yes. So important. Wow. The world needs to hear this. Yes. And I feel it's not only in the polarity scene, in every field. If we bring our traumas and our wounds into the work we're sharing, it's almost like we're spitting poison with the magic that we're sharing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why you can't tiptoe around the deep-rooted healing work if you really want to come from a pure space, if you want to share what you came here to do from purity, without the, putting your trauma on everyone and leaking it into everything you share.
Right. And that's why, a lot of this stuff was proliferated by David Data. And Data talks about 3 stages. The first stage is that sovereignty piece, right? And we can look at it. I would say David's a pretty brilliant dude, and so it can be applied in many different ways, but just generally, the first stage is the first one to really get right, and that's our sovereignty piece. That's our sense of like, who I am is enough in this moment. My needs are okay. Like I have healthy selfishness in me that I'm not going to repress or deny. Like, I need that. It's okay for me to have those things. The second stage is where we're in equal and balanced relationship. That's where our, that's like communication and healthy boundaries and understanding our partner's needs and desires and emotions in a way that is accepting and loving. Like, that stuff all has to be there so that we can then play in the so-called third stage, which is where we know that we're enough. We know that we're both masculine and feminine beings, and neither is better than the other, and neither should be overly expressed or overly repressed. And so, as those kinds of balanced beings, we know that 50-50 equality is not the end of the game. Like, it's not as interesting as, oh, I'm going to play black, you're going to play white, and we're going to see the dance that happens between us. I'm going to play feminine, you're going to play masculine, and we're going to see the beauty that can be created. Like, that is, it's the essential, it's Shiva Shakti. It's awareness and what we are aware of. Like, it's the most essential thing we can experience as humans, and it's fucking beautiful. And we're mucking it up with our own wounds. And it's hard. It's hard. It makes me hurt inside, because, well, it's just we're stumbling along, and I don't have all the answers, but I do know if we're internalizing the dialogue of I'm not enough, or my partner's not enough, and we're bringing in not masculine enough or not feminine enough, that's not the thing that we're aiming for. And we should go back and do the adequate therapeutic work, the adequate, inner child work, and relationship with our family work, and, healthy, safe dialogue work within our partnership. Like, that stuff should be there first before we, go take off our training wheels and try and magnetize polarity in our relationships ongoingly.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. So if we would sum this conversation up, it's like, do the inner work before you go out there. And I see also a lot of people hearing those things and then already sharing it without being embodied in it.
Right.
So I feel everything we share always comes down to our embodiment, because people can feel it in our energy if we really live what we're saying, or if we just read it somewhere and spit it out there because it sounds cool. So it really comes down to our own embodiment. And this is more louder. It's louder than the words we speak. Our energy speaks for itself. So
Totally.
yeah, that's so important. And we always remember like coming back to our own stuff and heal that first so we can share from a whole place.
Right. Yeah.
Amazing, Allan. Thank you so much for this conversation. There was so much wisdom and so much important knowledge in it. Is there something on your heart you would like to share, like an upcoming program or offer that you're birthing into the world, or something else that's coming through right now?
Yeah, I'm working on some a lot of my experiences that I've done so far have been live, particularly because I totally agree with you. Like our felt experience in our body is the thing that is most impactful, whether we're teaching something or receiving something. And so I've always oriented towards like live experiences, immersions, or trainings that are happening live. So, but I also recognize the beauty of, having someone be able to go through a training on their own without, needing to show up for something at a certain time at a certain place. So I'm working on some programs like that details aren't yet ready to be announced, but to keep an eye out for. And the other piece is that I have, as more and more men get introduced to this idea of men's work, and as that wave continues to grow, men are wanting to lead this kind of work, right? And it's kind of similar to what you just said. It's like someone reads something on Instagram or something, and then they just copy it, repeat it, and call it their own. A lot of men are out there going to a men's circle or a men's retreat and then being like, oh, I so want to do this, and then just starting their own thing, like not really understanding what it is, what they do, what they could do. And so I have a facilitator training program that I took all my years of doing this and put it into like, okay, if I woke up tomorrow and had no idea what the hell men's work was, but I knew I wanted to do it, where would I go? And I didn't know. So I created that program. I created that place for men to go to and learn how to do this work well, learn how to skillfully facilitate powerful experiences for other men in a safe way, in a deep way, and in a way that allows them to actually give their gift, which is what they really want to do. They want to have a positive impact on the people around them. So I'll be running that throughout this next year. So you can find information and such on my website, which we can provide in the show notes.
Yeah, I will put your links down below. That sounds life-changing and amazing and so beautiful. I have one last question that I ask all of my podcast guests, and I invite you to close your eyes for this one.
Okay.
And to feel into your body and to go back in time before you received your initiations to become a man, back into your childhood, and whatever age pops up intuitively is perfectly right. And if you could tell young Allan something you've learned along your journey that would have helped you immensely growing up, what would it be?
It would be to not dim your light. Not dim your light.
What age popped up for you? Was there a specific moment?
Well, I've actually had some recent discoveries come up around things that happened within my family that impacted everybody. Basically, sexual trauma that was incurred from one family member to another, and it was hidden for like 20 years, and the results of which impacted everybody in a really deep way. And it's one of those things that I've seen a lot in clients, that particularly men. I'm always surprised how many more have experienced sexual trauma at the hands of a family member or somebody close to them when they were young. I'm always surprised by the number of men who that's actually happened to. And the effects are they're devastating. They're really subtle and far-reaching. And anyway, I was about 10 when that started, and it changed everything. It changed, most importantly, my ability to feel free and authentic. And so that's why I said what I said about shining like not to dim my light.
Soul naked.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much for your light, for the work you
Thank
share,
you.
and for this conversation. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode as much as I did. I loved this conversation with Allan. Make sure to follow him. I will link his details in the show notes. And yeah, as always, if this interview inspired you, I would love to read your review on the Apple Podcast. It takes a minute, but it helps us spread the magic and the power of this work so it can ripple out a remembrance and healing into this planet. And I see you next week. Much love from Moria.